The Red Bear's Claw is one of the brand new weapon types in Elden Ring, and with its new moveset, you can essentially become one of the primal beasts yourself, tearing up everything that you see, and if you allow me one more pun, you can also rip your enemies apart with its insane Ash of War. So yes, this thing is incredibly quick, has an innate bleed build-up, as well as a damning Ash of War that can deal thousands of damage, and if you wanted to have an unlimited amount of fun using this weapon for yourself, let me show you how you can create the best build around it. But just before we jump into the build itself, I of course should show you how you even obtain this weapon in the first place. And yes, where this is a brand new weapon, it does require you going into the DLC, and more specifically finding your way just outside of the Temple Town ruins. Again, I'm just going to quickly show you the route on the map. So if you come from the Morph ruins site of Grace, there is going to be a lake that's sort of like directly north from this site of Grace, and at the end of that lake will be an opening in the cave. Go through that cave opening and essentially wrap around to the left, where you will then come across the ancient ruins base site of Grace, and then essentially from that site of Grace is just a straight shot through the canyon. There are going to be some giant golems in the way, but again, you can just run straight past them, because when you get to this area just outside the Temple Town ruins, there is going to be a spirit spring that is not working yet until you unlock it, but the object you need to hit in order to unlock this spirit spring is just simply slightly up the hill. So again, go up there, break it, and come back and use the spirit spring to jump up to the very top of this cliff, and in the middle is going to be a nameless mausoleum to which the Red Bear mini boss is residing inside. So yes, you do of course have to defeat this mini boss, and it can be a little bit tough, so I highly recommend that you come here with a very decent build. But essentially, once you beat this Red Bear mini boss, you will then be given the Red Bear's Claw along with the Iron Rivet armor set, and then once you fully upgrade this weapon, you will be ready to tear up everything in the lands between. Now of course I will show you the stats and everything in a moment, but I do just want to point out the sort of like playstyle that's necessary for this kind of weapon, because for any of you that have used maybe the Savage Claws or the Red Bear's Claw before, you'll know it's got a very unique moveset where you lunge forward using your light or heavy attacks in a similar bestial movement, reflective of obviously this being a beast claw. So where previous fist or claw weapons would actually just be immediately striking in front of you, you do actually leap forward towards your enemies, meaning that you can get the pounce on your enemies. Okay, I promise I'm going to stop with the bad puns now. But essentially you have to be careful with this lunging attack. If you are to use it whilst you're on top of the enemies, there's a good chance you're going to miss them because the tracking isn't so great, and there will be times where you lunge behind your enemies and you're basically slashing at nothing. But otherwise it has a very good chain attack, and depending on who you're up against, it can actually stun some enemies, especially with its charged heavy attacks. And as I mentioned in the intro, this weapon also has an innate bleed build-up. Now it doesn't have an arcane scaling, which we'll obviously come to in a moment, but where we're doing so many quick attacks, especially if you are utilizing those light attacks, although it only has a 45 bleed proc, you are actually proccing that bleed very often. But as always with these types of weapons, I wouldn't treat bleed as sort of like your main damage output, and more as a nice benefit that happens every so often. And the other brilliant thing about this weapon is it has a unique Ash of War that slashes through the air, leaving a whirlwind effect behind you when you do those slashes, and those sort of like air particles that you leave behind also deal additional damage. As you are probably going to see in the Melania gameplay that I'll show at some point, I'll try and obviously put it here as I'm talking about it, this can still stun lock certain enemies. So basically any humanoid enemy like Melania or any NPCs in the game, not only will the initial slash stagger them, but that sort of like delayed whirlwind attack will also damage them, and every single part of this attack is counted as physical damage. This particular Ash of War also got a buff in the most recent update where it does even more poise damage, so if you simply just want to spam this against enemies like Melania, not only will you stun lock them, but you'll also be breaking their poise every so often, and of course causing bleed buildup, which of course makes this stupidly powerful against those kinds of enemies. But obviously to deal that silly amount of damage, I of course need to show you the stats for this build, but there's also one more type of stat that I should make you aware of, and that is going to be the savings that you can get with today's video sponsor, because yes, we are indeed sponsored by Instant Gaming. For those of you that don't know, Instant Gaming is one of the leading providers for CD keys for your favorite games and also DLC bundles. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, the best thing about using Instant Gaming is that they are extremely reliable and are a much cheaper alternative to purchasing your games, because all of their codes are sourced directly from the publisher, meaning you don't have to pay for any shipping costs and therefore can save a whole bunch of money. So if you're interested, feel free to use the link in my description that will take you over to Instant Gaming. And again, just to be abundantly clear, if you use my link and end up purchasing anything from Instant Gaming, then you will be financially helping out the channel. So thank you again to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this particular video. But now I need to show you the stats for this incredible build. Here are those said stats, and as always, it is going to be a level 150 character. And as you can see, we've got 50 points into vigor, 11 mind, 21 endurance, 80 strength, 17 dexterity, 9 intelligence, 33 faith, and then 8 arcane. And again, just to kind of explain those stats a little bit more, the starting class with this character was a samurai, but you can choose any starting class that you want, because essentially we do not put any points into intelligence or arcane, as again, arcane has no effect on scaling with this weapon, so does not affect the bleed proc either, but we pump everything that we can into strength. And I took it all the way to the final soft cap, because you cannot two-hand this weapon in terms of like using the weapon with both of your hands. By two-handing this weapon, you actually equip a glove in each hand, so you don't get the additional strength benefits when two-handing a weapon, which is why again I advise taking it all the way up to 80. But then we've also got 33 faith in the build so that we can run both Howler Shibiri and also the Golden Vow incantations to again buff our damage output by 25 and 15% respectively. And then essentially any points that are left over I just put into dexterity, because the weapon does scale with dexterity, it's just a D-rated scaling as long as you fully upgrade it. So basically any spare points should be going into dex. And for a level 200 version of this build, that is exactly what I suggest that you do, because as you can see right now, I highly suggest that you just improve your vigor up to that 60 soft cap before then possibly increasing your mind up to 15 just to give you a little bit more FP so you can use the Ash of War a few more times, as well as increasing your endurance to again allow you to use more attacks without having to worry about your stamina being depleted. But then, as I say, then pump the rest into dexterity just to simply get the best AR out of this incredible weapon. But no matter whether you're going to be using a level 200 or a level 150 build with this weapon, here are the talismans that I recommend that you use. And again, feel free to pause the video, take note and jot them down. But as you can see almost straight away, I highly recommend that you run both Millicent's Prosthesis and the Rottened Winged Insignia, because where this weapon can deal a lot of attacks in very quick succession, we will of course be getting the extra damage boost with successive attacks very easily, so it's more than ideal to run both of these. But of course that does require you going into New Game Plus to get both of them, because for those of you that don't know, they're tied to Millicent's questline and you can only get one or the other per playthrough. So if you've only got one of these two talismans, feel free to swap out whichever one you don't have with something like the Ritual Sword talisman, because then you'll be getting a plus 10% extra damage boost whenever you're at full HP. But for the other two talismans, I highly recommend that you run the Shard of Alexander, because again, where we're utilizing that insane Ash of War, that will boost that overall damage output by 15%, before then finishing it off with the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, because again, whenever a bleed proc does occur, you will then be getting a plus 20% buff to your overall damage output. And then just to kind of like finalize the build and put it all together in the Wonder Physick, I do highly recommend that you use both the Thorny crack tier as well as the Stone Barb crack tier, because then that way this weapon just becomes even more powerful, especially with successive attacks. But you'll also get a 30% buff to your stance damage, which is actually really useful for this build, as you'll be able to take down even some of the hardest bosses relatively quickly, especially if you're using that insane Ash of War. And just before we end this video, of course you can see the armor set that I am rocking, and it does include the Pelt of Ralva as well as the Iron Rivet chest piece. But the beautiful thing about this weapon is where you're actually using two claws, if you two-hand them, it doesn't show your gauntlets. So you can actually run some of the more stockier gauntlets like the Verdigris gauntlets, or even ones like the Tree Sentinel gauntlets, and you won't see them. So again, feel free to put whatever gauntlets you want. Obviously go for like the best defense and poise, obviously. And then for the leggings, I was swapping them out for the Bull Goat leggings and the Fire Prelate leggings, just again to give me the best defenses, whilst also somewhat looking okay on our character. But of course, you can use whatever armor combination you want to use with this weapon. And if you haven't used the Red Bear's Claws yet, I highly recommend that you do. And just like that, that is how you create the ultimate build around the Red Bear's Claw. Of course, as always, I am not the best Elden Ring player in the world, and that is quite prevalent with the gameplay going on in the background, so I tend to always ask you guys at the end, if you've got any ways to improve this build and make it any better than it already is, then do use the comment section down below to let me know of any ways to make this even better. Of course, we could use the obvious things like the white mask to of course increase our damage whenever a bleed proc occurs, but I felt that using this particular armor set was best for the aesthetic of the build. But again, let me know what you think about that. But otherwise, whilst you're down there, you should also see in the description and potentially a pinned comment of our unique link that will take you over to Instant Gaming. Again, I know I've already advertised them, but if you are looking for cheaper alternatives to buy your new games or even DLCs like Shadow of the Erdtree, definitely give them a look and check out their website, because they do have some tremendous deals as well as flash deals every week, so I'd say it's definitely worth at least checking it out. But otherwise, I hope you have enjoyed this build and this video. Of course, if you have done, if you don't mind me asking you just to leave a like rating down below, as it genuinely does help out the channel tremendously. And of course, if you're new around here or you find yourself coming back to the channel and you aren't yet subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're getting really close to 30,000 subscribers now, which was actually a goal for next year, so if we can get it by the end of the month, that would be incredible. So feel free to join the rest of the legends that are subscribed to the channel and make history by being one of the first 30,000. But yeah, I think I've said more than enough for this video, guys, so I'm gonna let you go. Obviously, have fun with this build. Let me know how you get on if you do happen to use it. But for now, I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I guess I will catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye.